Hello and welcome to this week's Green Shoots, a history of Irish football with me, Caelan Kerwin and Gary Spain. Coming up on this week's podcast, there's a storm brewing in Saipan in 2002, and it's about to engulf an Irish team on the eve of a World Cup and a stunned nation back home. Don't forget to share the show on your own social media to let people know more about the history and heritage of Irish football. Drop a comment and 5 stars for us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or whatever platform you use to listen to us on. Now, it was by far the biggest story of the year to that point. It caused a huge split in national opinion. Roy Keane was one of the biggest footballers in the world. He had become synonymous with a relentless run of trophies at the club. His manager for the Republic of Ireland, Mick McCarthy, had been one of our greatest defenders under Jack Charlton, not blessed with pace, but blessed with a great ability to read the game. He was Jack's captain, and now he was manager of the national side. There had been rumblings for years that Roy was unhappy with the Irish national team setup. It wasn't good enough, and he saw Mick as enabling it for far too long. Something was about to give.
I suppose, Gary, where to start with this? It's probably one of the most extraordinary moments in Irish football history, perhaps even in Irish history in general. Such was the outcry from it as well. Have you ever, as somebody who's kind of lived and breathed the game for so long, have you ever heard of something as controversial as this, as something that has split the nation so much as what happened in Saipan?
No, I mean, you could nearly start by saying, don't mention the war, you know. It's it was incredible. I mean, I've talked before about the way that football has, you know, it captivated the country. And when World Cup matches were on, there was nobody else. Nothing else happened. Everything stopped. But that was uniting everybody. Saipan, I mean, it totally captivated the nation. I mean, it was front page news, it was back page news, it was center page news. There wasn't anything else. But it also divided everyone. You know, I mean, he walked out, he was sent home. You know, where do you start? It divided people on all sorts of lines. And the other thing, it really hurt because it was just over a week before the World Cup. It was a huge, huge thing. I mean, everybody was so looking forward to it. It was going to be a massive tournament. And just there was an incredible feeling of sadness as well, because it felt like we were losing our chance, you know, that it was going to put the whole kibosh on the World Cup.
And also because, like, Roy Keane was this generation's, Liam Brady. He was like the figurehead. He was this amazing, incredible talisman, and the guy who drove the team. And he was playing at the biggest club in the world at the time, who was winning trophies, league titles, FA Cups, European Cups, etc. So he's already headline news wherever he goes, and then this happens, and it just explodes into this kind of different level, you know. I mean, Joe Duffy's talking about it. They're ringing into Liveline about it, and it's fronting up every major news outlet, newspapers, television, kind of news, everything. We just went into a different level, you know.
I mean, the Taoiseach Bertie Ahern, not only was he talking about it, I don't think he did anything else. He got involved. He tried to solve it. And I mean, he probably deserves a lot of credit for the peace process in Northern Ireland, but even Bertie couldn't solve Saipan,
the animosity between them.
Yeah, it was just a bridge too far, you know. So,
I mean, I suppose where do we start with this? I suppose, like, in the kind of recency of what had happened, it was interesting. If you go back and listen to the previous podcast that we talked about the Irish team, it was obviously the qualification campaign for this 2002 World Cup, and you made a really good point about the match we played away to Netherlands, and it was 2-2. we were 2-0 up, but the game ended 2-2. And you kind of made the point that perhaps that's where the rift between the persons, between Mick McCarthy and Roy Keane, that was kind of maybe the first kind of signs that it was something a bit more serious than just a kind of it being miffed at being 2-0 up and then drawn 2-2.
Yeah. I mean, if you go back to that game, I mean, Mick was celebrating at the end, a 2-2 draw in Amsterdam. Fantastic result away to a top quality side. Roy was devastated and gutted. We were 2-0 up. We should have won the game. Now, I can see both points of view. I probably should say the rift is probably going back even to the playing days. And there's talk it went back to a US tour when, look, they were end-of-season tours. There was a lot of drink involved and maybe things. I mean, those games were never taken seriously.
These would have been, we kind of mentioned them before, it's like the US Cup or something. Was that it?
Yeah. I mean, we went there in 91. I can't remember. That was for one game. But in 92, we went to play in a US Cup with USA, Italy, and Portugal. And look, with all due respects, we didn't take it. It wasn't treated. I mean, football was different in those days as well. There was often end of season. It was an end of season tour. And there was a lot of drinking going on. There was players carried out of pubs and all sorts of stuff went on, right? It was different times, and the games they didn't matter, but I believe there were some rifts, people missing buses, and I probably don't want to say too much more because I could get it wrong and not misremembering it and everything. So, but there definitely there was no love lost even going back to then. Now, I will make another point. I mean, you already made it about Roy Keane winning European Cups, Champions Leagues, etc., playing for the biggest club in the world at the time. He was the best player at the biggest club in the world at the time.
Very true.
And Roy Keane then, and even Roy Keane now, he's always been box office. He's just, I mean, Liam Brady was a wonderful footballer. Johnny Giles is a wonderful footballer, but they were never box office. I'm not even sure if I can explain that and do it justice, but he's always in the news. It's always a story. It's always huge. If Roy Keane's at an event, it's a big event. People will tune in now to coverage of the Champions League or the Premier League just to watch Roy Keane. And
I mean, you see it on social media even now. It's always Roy Keane's quotes that go the viral. Yeah, they go exactly. Everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and he's so much of the story. I mean, back in 2002, he was at the peak of his powers. We were going to a World Cup. We'd knocked the Netherlands out of the World Cup. One of the major footballing powers then, now, and even before that. So we had a really good side. And Roy Keane had told Alex Ferguson he was going to the World Cup to win it. So that's where we're coming from. To be honest...
That's not an extraordinary statement, though, to be fair, is it? Because we had fantastic players. We had Damien Duff, we had Robbie Keane, we had these an inordinate amount of just really good, talented players alongside really experienced players who kind of knew how to kind of be backs to the walls if they wanted backs to the walls, but they knew how to attack in the moments when we had those opportunities.
Okay, I as a fan and even remembering back then, I honestly did not believe. Now, having said that, I didn't believe we were going to the World Cup to win it. Having said that, I paid for tickets all the way to the final, conditional Irish tickets, and it actually caused, let's say, just some ruptions because I had booked 2 tickets all the way to the final, and 2 of the others on our trip had 2 tickets all the way to the quarterfinals. And there was a point when it looked like we were potentially going a lot further. And people do look back and say, if we'd won the penalty shootout against Spain, There was Korea. There was a bad German team, which it was a German team we'd drawn with that we could have potentially beaten in a semi-final, and who knows, a Brazil-Ireland final. But
I mean, like you say that, but I mean, looking back on it, and obviously I'm only giving my personal opinion on it, but like looking back on it, it was a fairly weak World Cup in terms of teams that were. You didn't have one team that was absolutely stacked with amazing talent that was clearly head and shoulders above the rest. It was everybody was the top kind of so-called top nations were all fairly on par with each other, and even at that, they didn't have extraordinary teams.
No, I mean, look, Brazil, I think, were deserving winners, and Ronaldo, R9, as he's probably known now, I mean, he had a fantastic World Cup, but he had been injured, he'd been out of form, so it kind of came from nowhere, you know. He was a fantastic player, he was a star at 98, but he wasn't expected to be the star and the leading goal scorer that he was in 2002. So, look, I think you can make a case that we could have won it. We'll never know, you know, we never will. I mean, look, we could have gone out in the group stages if Roy had stayed, because there could have been animosity in the camp. You don't... It's impossible to tell. And I mean, the other point I would make is people would say we would have battered that Korean team in the quarterfinal. Spain battered that Korean team, but if I remember, the referee was subsequently done for all sorts of stuff. So, and Giovanni Trapattoni was very upset at the way Italy were refereed against the Korean team as well. So there was other stuff went on in that World Cup as well. So look, who knows what would have happened had we beaten Spain. The World Cup itself is probably a discussion for another podcast, but certainly Roy Keane was going there to win the tournament, and that's all he knew, was going to win things.
Yeah, and that was part of his his ethos. It's obviously something that, you know, had been drummed into him since he was a kid. Do you know what I mean? And then playing with, you know, some great players at Nottingham Forest and stuff like that before he moved to Manchester United. So, and that was a Nottingham Forest team that had players that had won European Cups in it as well. So the idea of, you know, when you go to play something, whether it's a tournament or it's a match, you go to play to win. There's no let's turn up and see what we do. It's, if we're going to do this, let's do this right.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about it before. He was at a Manchester United side. He was the best player in that Manchester United side. I don't think that's even an argument. And they were setting very, very high standards at that time. Now, I know things went wrong with himself and Alex Ferguson subsequently, but at the time, they were setting very high standards and achieving very high standards, you know, winning, as you said, Champions Leagues, winning the Premier League. They seem to be winning it nearly every year. I know actually Arsenal won it that year, but United had won it. They won it the year afterwards. I think they'd won it the year before. But you know what I mean. You know? So
let's talk about Mick McCarthy as well, because he's very much of the ilk of perhaps Jack Charlton as well. He was Jack's captain, etc. You know, a northern boy too, from Northern England, etc. So he's very much in that kind of that mold of Jack Charlton, in terms of, you know, that's what you have to do to win games. You put them under pressure. You take the game to them in the ways that we know how, and then we take our chances. Is it fair to say that maybe Mick McCarthy is an extension of Jack Charlton, or is that an unfair comment that he makes it his own kind of management?
He had his own style, but he was very much a pragmatist as well. And I mean, look, Mick in general was a limited enough player, but knew his limitations. Now, for Ireland, he was a hugely important player because, look, our best ever central defensive pairing was probably Mick McCarthy and Kevin Moran. But Paul McGrath in front of them was crucial. You know, Mick didn't have a lot of pace, but he was an incredibly smart defender.
Yeah, it forced him to think more, didn't it, about where he was, his positioning and so on.
Exactly. And, I mean, he went into management. He probably got the Irish job very early. I mean, he'd come from Millwall. He was still a relatively young man. And he probably took time. I mean, he was under a lot of pressure. We've already talked about his first two campaigns. France 98, okay, we nearly got it right in the end in the playoff, but probably the weakest group we ever got, and we messed it up. Romania ran away with the group. That Macedonia last gasp equaliser cost us a place in Euro 2000. But then he did turn it around completely, and obviously with a lot of help from Roy Keane. We've already gone through the qualification campaign, but to actually split sides as talented as Portugal and the Netherlands was an incredible achievement. But I think it's also fair to say that he was a lot younger, he was a lot less experienced than somebody like Alex Ferguson, who would have been managing, and he would look. Roy Keane was managed by Brian Clough and Alex Ferguson. That's the.
I mean, not bad if you're going to have managers.
Yeah, well, it's.
But I mean, for Mick, I mean, the for him on I suppose maybe you call it still call it the opposite side of this, but you know, as he said, he's a pragmatist. He understands that, you know, you take results where you can get them. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily go your way, but when the good results happen, you hold on to them. You know, we mentioned already that 2-2 in the Netherlands and the draw to Portugal. It absolutely would have snapped your hand off of it, regardless of being 2-0 up and 2-0 down. When you start that group phase and you have to go away to Portugal, you have to go away to the Netherlands, two really good, talented teams, and you come out with a point each. And he must be sitting there going, yeah, but you know what? I'll snap your hand off for that. So, you know, it's fair to him as well that he's part of making these results happen.
Everyone before that game in Amsterdam would have been delighted with a point. But if you're 2-0 up with less than 20 minutes to go, and having played very well to be 2-0 up, it is a bit of a kick in the teeth when you only draw 2-2, and it feels like a defeat. I'll give you an example, even the current League of Ireland. I mean, Dundalk have started the season. They've drawn in the Brandywell and they've drawn in Tala. They drew in Tala on Monday night with 10 men. They equalised in the last minute. It feels like a win. They were 2-1 up in the Brandywell in the 97th minute, and it felt like a defeat. Now, they'd have been delighted with a 2-2 draw going up, but they were sick going home, you know. So it's the way a game can turn out and everything. And I can see why at the time it felt like it was the opening game of the campaign, but it felt like we'd blown our chance from being 2-0 up, but also coming away from Amsterdam. Yeah, that was still a good point.
There's that famous photograph at the end of the home game against the Netherlands as well, and Roy Keane and Mick McCarthy are, shall we say, tentatively shaking hands, like the lightest, most non-celebratory handshake that you might possibly have after an extraordinary result like that. And it was quite clear that there was something either brewing or something just was not right between the two.
Yeah, look, I think it's fair to say he didn't respect Mick McCarthy, you know. And then there was things like he missed out, if I remember correctly, he missed out Niall Quinn's testimonial where the Republic of Ireland 11 played Sunderland. And it was kind of a big deal at the time because the players, they weren't as wealthy then as they are now. And Niall was donating all the proceeds to charity. Now, the players then were normally, a testimonial was kind of giving players a lump sum near the end of their careers after playing 10 or 12 years with a club. And so it was a huge gesture by Niall to give the money away because, look, these days players don't even get testimonials anymore because, look, they're so wealthy and everything like that. But it wasn't quite the same in 2002. The money was starting to come into the game, but it certainly wasn't there at the levels that it is now.
Yeah, so Roy doesn't appear at that, and that's another little kind of, I suppose, a straw on top of the top of the camel. And
yes, and there's a dispute as to why he wasn't there. So that's another point. I think he had made it, or he had passed on information, but that hadn't
filtered through.
Got there, filtered through. Now, it was we're saying Mickey Mouse game.
It's testimonial.
But still, it's a testimonial, but it was still part of the warm up. It was. I was at the match. I'm trying to remember. I remember we had a lot of Newcastle United players on the team. Andy O'Brien played, Shea Given played, which didn't go down too well.
So are people saying that that's a little bit of disrespect on Roy's part, even if that information hasn't filtered through, that he hasn't turned up, so he's given them the old kind of heave ho?
Yeah, no, I think that is disputed, because I believe he said his agent had made phone calls and messages didn't go through or something like that. But it's certainly been perceived as that. I think it's fair to say Niall Quinn and Mick McCarthy saw it as being a little bit of a snub.
So things aren't good off the pitch relationship wise. We go to it's May 2002, so we're over there prepping for the World Cup. What exactly happens? What's the kind of, I suppose, the spark that lights this kind of bonfire that happens?
I think it's fair to say nobody in Ireland, or very, very, very few people in Ireland, had ever heard of Saipan, had ever heard of the Northern Mariana Islands, and I bet you couldn't name a single other Northern Mariana Island.
Geography teachers everywhere.
Well, I think even the best of the Irish geography teachers would probably struggle to rattle off Northern Mariana Islands. And apparently Guam isn't one. But it's near. Saipan is near Guam. It's U.S. territory. The story was, the FAI or MIC or whatever decided to have a few days R&R in Saipan, but it seems to have been a strange place. So that was the plan, and then they were going to fly to Japan, and then so they had a friendly lined up about a week before the tournament, and that the serious preparation was meant to happen in Japan. So this was a few days in Saipan. Now, when they got to Saipan, first of all, the logistics didn't work. None of the gear arrived, so they had no jerseys, they had no boots, they had no footballs. The only pitch there, I believe, was a bit of a disaster.
So it would have been summertime as well, so it's going to be reeking hot, and it's going to be like playing on concrete as well. Yeah, and they didn't have any gear, didn't have any bibs, so that obviously didn't go down well with Roy Keane. That simply would not have happened at Manchester United in 2002, or at any time probably. So that didn't go down well. Now, there was different attitudes among different players coming and saying, well, look, the serious business starts when we get to Japan, so this is just time to relax. But Roy Keane was looking at a pitch that players could get injured on. There was no gear, there were no footballs. So again, you had a difference of opinion. Probably communication certainly would have helped it. I go back to Bertie Ahern, and I know there's a lot of stories about Bertie Ahern, but the one thing he was a brilliant communicator. He opened doors, he made things happen, and I go back, I was joking a little bit about Saipan, but I go back to the Northern Ireland peace process and the communication that actually brought everyone together there. And I think just a little bit of communication, a little bit better communication before they left Dublin, before and even while they were there, certainly would have helped. But certainly by the time they got to Saipan, things were very, very tense. It seems as if it kind of begins to spiral a bit, as I think Roy does an interview with a journalist. The journalist's name kind of escapes me at the moment, but I think it's with the Irish Times or the Irish Independent. I think it was the Irish Times.
So, there's a couple. You see, there was a team meeting, and Roy, so I might be a little bit out on the timings here, but my understanding was there was a team meeting in which Roy just gave it to Mick. Now, there are stories he didn't insult Mick's nationality or anything like that. So there are false stories, I believe, out there. But certainly there was a tirade there. Some of the players like Niall Quinn, Steve Staunton, etc., more senior players, were totally shocked by this. I believe privately a couple of the younger players were more on Roy's side. So subsequent to that, Roy was meant to do an interview with Paul Kimmage. And again, I probably need to be careful, but I think this is pretty sure on the facts here. Roy Keane was doing an interview with Paul Kimmage for the Sunday paper, and I think Paul Kimmage may have been the Sunday Independent at the time. Now he's worked for a couple of, so I could be wrong on the Sunday newspaper, but certainly he was doing an interview for a Sunday newspaper, and Paul Kimmage allowed Tom Humphreys of the Irish Times to sit in the interview, but only on the basis that he couldn't use the info until after it appeared in the Sunday paper that Paul Kimmage was working for. And, well, the interview was so explosive and so box office that Tom Humphreys of the Irish Times decided he was going to break his word. Now, I think, given what subsequently, the man subsequently served time in jail for being a sex offender with young girls. So I think he broke the story. So the story broke in the Irish Times by Tom Humphreys, and that caused absolute ruptions. And there was subsequent row between Roy and Mick, and he walked out, he was sent home. I mean, he threatened to walk out. I mean, you'll have people listening to this saying, he walked out in his country. He was sent home. So 24 years on, it's still a debate. So.
Well, I mean, I know about when the movie came out, the movie Saipan, obviously about this incident recently released. Kevin Kilbane, wrote a story and said, look, a lot of this stuff is a bit fanciful. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of not what happened with certain aspects of it. So it's kind of, are we kind of, because we're so far away from it now, are we kind of falling into the kind of the old trap of turning a story into a myth and into a legend and kind of trying to piece together again what actually did happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the team meeting definitely happened, and the tirade definitely happened, and the subsequent interview with Paul Kimmage and Tom Humphreys definitely happened. At that stage, the team went to Japan, and Roy Keane flew home alone. So I think all of that happened. Now, there can be some dispute and maybe some fabrication of what went on in the team meeting and things that are claimed were said, were not said, etc. But I think they were actual facts. And subsequent to that, there were a lot of efforts to get Roy back. And I should also mention that the FAI tried to bring Colin Healy into the squad because we were going to be a man down now. And unfortunately, we just missed the deadline. So I think there were shirts and everything printed. I can't remember if he got on a plane or not, but he was at one point going to the World Cup and FIFA then wouldn't allow it. But Roy Keane was still able to go back. So that's where the Taoiseach got involved. Everyone got involved. I mean, and then it looked like there was a deal done. So the story was that Roy Keane was going to do an interview. So Mick McCarthy was saying, I think he could come back if there was some sort of an apology or some sort of words. I was still at home at this stage. We hadn't left for Japan, but it was in the days just before we were due to leave. And the word, it appeared to be that Bertie Ahern had negotiated some sort of wording, and Roy Keane was to do an interview with Tommy Gorman on RTE, and Mick McCarthy was going to, watch the interview, and whatever was said in the interview or whatever was going to be agreed, their story was, now I don't know how close, and this is maybe where Kevin Kilbane and everything else gets involved. I don't know how close it was, but certainly at the time and living through it, myself and other fans, we were of the belief, and we were just praying and hoping that it could get sorted out, that this Roy Keane interview with Tommy Gorman was going to fix everything.
Yeah, pave things out. And
pave things out. So there was going to be some sort of a wording. Now, I think getting Roy Keane to apologise probably was never going to be a runner, but there was going to be some sort of a wording, and it was Bertie Ahern and other people involved as well. I mean, the FAI were caught a little bit on the hop as well, by the way, on this. John Delaney, actually, he wasn't that senior in the association at the time. He was the only one left at home, and everybody else was out. And so he ended up fronting a lot of the press conferences, etc. So, and I think he would have been quite close to Roy Keane at the time as well. So, but anyway, I think Bertie Ahern was probably the closest to have actually agreed the wording, etc. But the interview with Tommy Gorman didn't go as planned. I mean,
did not help.
It didn't help. No, I mean, it went the other way. Basically, that was the end of it. My recollection is Roy said, well, stuff that was.
Yeah, and I think looking back on it, I think once Roy kind of decided, right, I'm kind of done here, and he's gone. I think it's going to have to be extraordinary wording to get him back in the room again, to get him back to a World Cup, because it was clear that he was extraordinarily adamant that he had had enough of this, and he'd had enough of the Ireland setup, etc., and that he was just like, you know what, I'm kind of done here. I know it's the World Cup, but I can't keep doing this. And it was like 10 years of frustration. It was just kind of him going, yeah, all right, you know, and I'm kind of done. Is that like, it's fairly plausible, you know, to be fair. And I have to add, by the way, and people who know me will know I am a Manchester United fan, but I'm not reading this through rose red tinted glasses, so to speak, you know. So, but I think once Roy kind of decided that he was done, it was going to be incredibly difficult for anything to change.
Look, I am thinking back to the time, and maybe it was just hoping against hope, because I mean, I'll be very frank, when I was getting on a plane and we had a really long journey to Japan. We had to go via London and Singapore. It was actually a cheaper way to go, but it involved several hours more flying to get there, because everything was quite expensive at the time to get to the World Cup that time. And I mean, there was a few of us flying together, and we really felt like we'd be coming home after 3 group games. It's just a disaster. Nothing can be right. I mean, yeah, I think what you're saying is plausible. It's probably a fair comment. I probably think I'd agree with it. Having said that, it's the World Cup. It's how many? I mean, we haven't been to a World Cup since. We haven't been to a men's senior World Cup since. How many chances do you get to play in a World Cup? I mean, we've been in 3 ever. The World Cup is 96 years old. I mean, we've qualified for 3, hopefully
Roy
4
would have
this
been,
year.
94 would have been Roy's last time appearing at a World Cup as well.
Yeah,
so it makes it all the more kind of extraordinary that he would think, right, you know, I'm walking out on the biggest platform, you know, that there possibly could be, and not, you know, if he kind of, and I know we're getting into kind of semantics and all this kind of stuff, and it's kind of hard not to with something like this, but there were opportunities before when we didn't qualify for tournaments where he could have said, you know what, I've done my bit from a country, and, you know, it's time for me to kind of to exit stage left. But then we get to the biggest football tournament on the planet, and that's when the decision comes to walk away. I mean, I think that's where the controversy still remains, though, right? I mean, we're still talking about it now.
Yeah, and I mean, it's never far away. You know, if you get Irish fans in bars on away trips, it'll still come up. And I mean, it still it divides people. I mean, I think everybody in Cork was on Roy's side. Okay. Every Irish Liverpool fan was on Mick's side. Every Irish Man United fan was more or less on Roy's side. And then you had all sorts of different opinions on different things,
It's hard to explain to people now, particularly younger fans who might not have kind of lived through the experience. But I remember it as it just being this extraordinary news story that blew up the entire country. Nobody was talking about anything else for a week. It was just impossible to ignore it. I mean, can you possibly explain to people how obsessed this nation was with this news story?
Yeah, and I mean, the World Cup was already big news. And when the World Cup happens, everything stops. But there's other stuff going on. I mean, I think it broke on a Wednesday, about a week before the tournament, just over a week. We played our opening match on the 1st of June for that tournament. And it broke, if I remember, I was in work, I remember, and someone actually said it to me. And I was kind of gobsmacked. And I mean, the internet wasn't really as prevalent in 2002.
Very early stages.
I mean, it was the very early stages. Now, I worked in IT, I worked in a tech company, so you could get some news. But I mean, my phone at the time, everyone's phone at the time, I don't think there were smartphones in 2002. It was just calls and text and old Nokia.
WAP.
Yeah. So it wasn't as easy to get info, and it was kind of word of mouth. You're trying to get the radio on. We wouldn't have had the TV in work, obviously. And so the story was breaking. Everybody was already talking about it. And it just took over for that. I mean, I don't know what else was in the news. I don't think anything else was in the news for the rest of the time.
Well, if you're in government, it was the best time to release every kind of news under the sun, because nobody would have paid attention to it. It's an extraordinary incident in Irish football, and we kind of talked about Roy and his reputation afterwards. Like, Mick McCarthy still had a World Cup to take care of. He still had a team that he needed to try and motivate now and try and get into the frame of mind of playing in a World Cup. How does he do this? I mean, how do you pick up the pieces after something so extraordinary?
Yeah, and I mean, to make it worse, I mean, it can happen on the eve of a massive tournament. You can lose your captain, your talisman, your best player. But if you lose them to injury or something like that, at least you have some hope of bringing the squad together, etc. In this case, it was losing them to huge controversy. They were either sent home, walked out. You take your pick on that one. It was an incredibly tough task. And I mean, as I said, flying out to Japan, we were thinking it's going to be a disaster. The squad's going to be all over the place. And I think, if I remember, Jason McAteer got injured. There was a friendly in between when they got to Japan. They played this friendly a week before the Cameroon game, and Jason McAteer got injured in that. So everything was going wrong, So
Mick's got to essentially scramble to try and, I suppose, damage limitation and make sure things don't get any worse. We'll obviously talk about it in another podcast, but obviously we actually do fairly well with some results, etc., too, during the tournament. So given that this massive thing happens, your captain walks out, one of the best players in the world, he's not there anymore. Mick McCarthy is obviously the other person on the other side of this that obviously people judge just as much as they do Roy Keane. So where does his reputation stand, or where do people where do you make the thoughts on what Mick did right or what Mick did wrong, considering what happened afterwards, actually playing in the World Cup as well?
Well, I mean, Mick would have had quite a bit of negative press up to about 2000, up to that Macedonia game. He definitely turned it around. But I think the feeling was this could well have been the end of Mick. We had a very tough group. I mean, we were drawn with Germany, who are always one of the favourites. They ended up in the final. We were drawn with Cameroon, who were, I think, Olympic champions and African champions at the time, a hugely
Very good
talented
team,
Cameroon side. And we were drawn with, well, Saudi Arabia were not expected to threaten, but I mean, they had won the group that had sent Iran into the playoff against us. So there were meant to be no mugs. I mean, we beat Iran 2-1 in the end, you know. And another thing, Roy had missed the game in Tehran, which was another factor in the whole thing as well. So Mick, going into the World Cup, we'd have been under, I think, intense pressure. And I think had we gone out, I mean, had we lost to Cameroon, we didn't start well. Obviously, it's a different podcast, but the first half against Cameroon was pretty poor as well. We were a goal down. I mean, we could have been out of the World Cup after that game in Niigata, effectively, had we lost. Had we come home after 3 games, losing to Cameroon, probably have lost to Germany had we lost to Cameroon. We'd have been out even before we played Saudi. I think Mick probably would have been gone. You know, I think the pressure, everything would have just been he might have walked himself anyway. But obviously, he did an incredible job, obviously helped by the senior players, the likes of Steve Staunton, the likes of Niall Quinn, who rallied around, and the squad went to the World Cup with really good morale and put in some incredible performances. I mean,
and also kind of given the point as well that you kind of made earlier, which was there would have been younger players in the team that probably would have been kind of on the side of Roy, saying, look, you know, yeah, it's R&R, but we're still going to a World Cup. You need these kind of facilities. You need this kind of stuff as well. So he kind of does well to kind of make sure that the team as a whole doesn't fracture and kind of fall apart as well.
Yeah, that is crucial. I mean, he did pull them all together. I think it's probably, and I am looking back, and maybe you can get years out and things like that, but if you go back to, the football I originally remember, 70s, 80s, 90s, the level of professionalism was certainly nowhere near today's levels. I mean, in the 90s, players were still drinking a lot after games. I mean, the great Liverpool team that won those leagues and European Cups, they'd stop for fish and chips after games. You know, I mean, it's just
Gary Lineker. I was reading an article one time before. Gary Lineker said his favorite match day meal was 2 steaks and chips before.
Yeah, you know,
you're like, what?
The sports science, the sports nutrition just wasn't there in those days. Now, I did mention the 90s, and that was the era that Mick had played in, that Niall Quinn was playing through the 80s. Steve Staunton, the only Irishman to go to 3 World Cups. He had played through that era. I mean, Steve Staunton was obviously on the Liverpool sides, right? But professionalism and preparation was getting better and better as you went into the turn of the millennium. And then you take the younger players, the likes of the Gary Breens, the David Connolly's, who probably started playing in eras where there wasn't the same drinking culture, after games, the same culture. The culture was changing. The nutritionists were involved. Now, it's come on leaps and bounds since then, but certainly there was a journey from the 90s into the noughties, from professionalism, from preparation, from players, from sports science, etc. And so maybe that could explain why some of the older players might have been a little bit more tolerant about things going wrong. And Roy Keane was coming from Manchester United, where just the standards were the highest of the high. And I mean, he was the one setting the standards. He was the one barking at David Beckham to improve. You know, I mean, it's that he was the player at Man United. You know, he was able to call out world-class players, and they had to accept it because he was Roy Keane. He was their captain. He was their talisman.
So does Mick McCarthy's reputation then get salvaged by the fact that we do reasonably well in the World Cup, and that because it didn't all fall apart and your main man walked out the door, his reputation to kind of get saved a little bit?
Well, I mean, reasonably well is being gutted and very disappointed at losing to Spain on penalties in the knockout stages of a World Cup. So yeah, I mean, I think looking back is probably even better than it felt at the time. You know, I mean, I think if we qualify for this World Cup and lose to Spain, or I don't know what stage we can draw Spain, but I mean, if we were to go out in the round of 16 or at the round of 32 on penalties to a major footballing nation, it would be seen as a huge, even qualifying for this World Cup would be a huge success. Expectations were, I think it's fair to say, higher back then. You know, I mean, we certainly expected that we would have a very good chance of beating Spain going into that game. We certainly could have beaten them. Mick did face criticism for not realising that he was up against 10 men for the second half of extra time. Spain had to bring off a player at halftime in extra time due to injury, and I believe Mick didn't cop that. But all in all, I think his reputation was enhanced by the World Cup. Obviously, the likes of Gary Breen's reputation went through the roof, but with his performances. But in general, it was considered to be a very good World Cup. I mean, we knocked out a very, very good Cameroon side. We played Germany off the park I know we were a goal down, but we were battering down the door for much of the second half, again against a major footballing power. And I mean, maybe I was very harsh at the start saying they were a bad Germany side that got to the final. By German standards, they still got to a World Cup final, right? It's
a terrible German team only loses in a World Cup final.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it is different standards, and you're judging the Germanys, the Brazils, the Argentinas of this world by
their own standards.
You know, by their own standards. Yes, I mean, Germany would not. It was, I think, in fairness to say, it was a limited enough German team.
Yeah.
I mean, they've had better teams. I mean, they won a World Cup in 1990. They'd lost the finals in 82. They'd lost in 86. They had they obviously went on to win it in 2014 as well. But and they were also they were hosting it in 2006, and they were very disappointed to go out in the semi-finals. You know, so they were at the time, and even today, I mean, if you're talking about potential World Cup winners in July, you certainly have to have the Germans in the mix. They mightn't be the favourites, but they're Germany in a World Cup final is not an unrealistic prediction.
Never write up the Germans is possibly the greatest slogan and testament to German football, as they always seem to come around and surprise in certain World Cups. Anyway, I suppose an easy question to finish it all off, Gary. Whose side are you on? Mick McCarthy's or Roy Keane's?
To be honest, and I am going to sit in the fence on this one, because I was never really, I wasn't as dogmatic. I was just really upset by the whole thing. I mean, it's who's your favorite child? You know, I mean, I was hoping and praying that Roy would go back. You know, that
I think that's kind of perhaps something that gets lost in the conversation as well, is that when you go to a World Cup, you want to see all of your best players play, and in the middle of all of this is Irish football fans who just want to see their team kind of go out there, do well, represent us in the way that we can be proud of them. And then all of a sudden they're being drawn into this side, and then they're drawn into that side, and no, you can't. You have to choose one or the other, and it's got to be him or it's got to be him. And Irish football fans are like, I just want to watch football. What's wrong with it all?
I think another point, and I think I've made this quite a few times, and I think people can see this maybe just since November. When we go to a World Cup, every man, woman and child in the country is invested in the tournament. If you go back to last November before we played Portugal, okay, look, we were bringing 3,000 fans to Budapest anyway, so we've got fantastic support. But for the vast majority of the country, the national football team weren't really big news and they weren't really paying attention. We were as good as out of the World Cup, really. I mean, how many people expected us to beat Portugal and then go to Budapest and beat Hungary? Since then, there's just so many people again have discovered their love of the team. It's become a lot more hype is back. It's become a much bigger story. Obviously, next month, if we beat the Czechs and then we beat Denmark or North Macedonia to qualify for a World Cup, it's just going to go through the roof. Again, it's just going to take over everything. And it can mean a different thing to different people. I mean, Saipan, to many people, was the main story. They're suddenly getting invested in it. This is what's happening. Whereas for many of us, eat, sleep, breathe football 365 days a year. It's the World Cup for the national team. It's the World Cup is the pinnacle. I mean, you're running around football pitches at 8, 9, 10 years of age. You dream of scoring the winning goal for Ireland in a World Cup. It's the pinnacle of football. For me, anyway. I appreciate other people will say the Champions League and club football, but with all due respect, our clubs are so far off ever playing in a Champions League group stage, not to mind the Champions League final, that the prospect of any of our clubs playing in the Champions League final is just so remote. We can still dream about playing in a World Cup, playing in a latter rounds, and we could have got to the final in 1990 if things had changed. Who knows what would have happened in 2002? I mean, had we beaten the Dutch in '94, that Brazil team were wobbling a bit. You never know.
But yeah, I think that's a really good point, because and obviously Ireland rugby has gone to World Cups and etc. and obviously we have the big kind of all Ireland hurling and football final days and all that kind of stuff. But even with Ireland going to Rugby World Cup, it doesn't feel like the whole nation is completely stopped and everybody's like, oh my God, we have to watch this. Football really is intrinsically linked with the DNA of a nation, that for us, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's classless because everything stops. I mean, it's working class, middle class, whatever you want. Everybody. I mean, the buses stop, the trains stop. I told the story before about my colleague who went home, came out, he was distracted in work and came out during the Romania game and worked for a large American corporation with 24-hour security. And he was walking out, the security guards had deserted their post. He walked out the door and Chuck had decided there was a nuclear holocaust because that was in 1990. And he was driving home. It was plausible. That's what he assumed. He was driving home across Galway and there was nobody. There were no cars, there were no buses, there were no people. And he drove the whole way across Galway, didn't see anybody, got out home in Salthill, arrived in, and his wife and daughter were watching the Romania match. And he was trying to get home to die with his wife and daughter. That's what he was thinking. He was driving in a panic. And he told me that when I came back from Italy, And I mean, he didn't assume anything else. I mean, he'd never seen anything like it, that you drive across a city and there isn't a single person on the street. There isn't a single vehicle moving. There isn't a bus. I mean, there's photographs of O'Connell Street in Dublin during the World Cup and there's nothing. There is nobody there. If everything stops. And I mean, that doesn't happen for a Rugby World Cup. It doesn't happen for an All-Ireland final. It doesn't happen, even if we got to a Rugby World Cup final, there is no way the country would be stopped like that. I mean, you could drive through Kilkenny, Portlaoise, and most people wouldn't know. You could drive through North Dublin and most people wouldn't even know we're in a World Cup.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary thing, and I think that's part of the reason why this kind of Saipan incident is such a, even now it's such an emotive kind of subject in Irish football, because it blends all those things together, right? It's got us at a major tournament. It's got probably the best player in the world or close to it. in playing for us as a nation. I mean, extraordinary. Playing in the biggest team in the world, and you've got the manager who has to kind of, you know, put all these pieces together of young talent and experienced heads and all that kind of stuff, and it has the kind of the right sprinkling for the magic to happen, and then it all just kind of falls apart and somehow comes back together, and it's this extraordinary story. I think that has so many different kind of elements to it, and that's why we kind of still are talking about it now 24 years later.
And that's why there's a play, there's a movie, there's so many books. I mean, it's as I said at the start, it's box office.
Yeah, Roy Keane is box office. Wherever he goes, whatever he does, even 24 years later, it's still box office. Gary, next time we talk about the Republic of Ireland's national football team, it is going to be, of course, the 2002 World Cup and that extraordinary journey as well that gave us so much. But as ever, thanks very much for your memories of arguably the most controversial and extraordinary incident of Irish football too.
Thanks, Kim. Okay.
Well, that's it for this week's show. My thanks to Gary. As ever, don't forget to share the show on your own social media to let people know more about the history and heritage of Irish football. Drop a comment and 5 stars for us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever it is that you listen to us on. And remember, support your local League of Ireland and Northern Ireland Football League teams. It's our heritage, it's our game. Bye for now.